Ladies and gentlemen, as of yesterday afternoon, everyone's favorite low IQ congressional representative, Jasmine Crockett, is now under federal investigation. You see, just yesterday, the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, has initiated an investigation into Representative Jasmine Crockett regarding donations made to her campaign through none other than ActBlue. And now, folks, if you don't know what ActBlue is, trust me, we're going to unpackage that later in the video, but first, check this out. Initial reports filed by the FEC are indicating numerous fraudulent campaign donations directed towards Jasmine Crockett. As an example, over 50 individual donations were made under just one person's name. But here's the thing, that person had no idea about those donations. They were all fraudulent. And so what seems to be the case is that ActBlue, this progressive fundraising organization, has been hijacking random people's personal information and then using that information to donate to progressive politicians just like Jasmine Crockett. Now, folks, there's a lot more to this story that we're going to talk about, but first I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news coverage, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. The Congressional House Oversight Committee has actually been trying to get information regarding ActBlue's very suspicious behavior for a long time. Take a look.
We requested from Treasury during the Biden administration to see whether or not there were bank violations called suspicious activity reports against ActBlue. Of course, they never would get back with us. Finally, after the election, they confirmed that there were some. They allowed my staff to go in and view like 10 or 12. They were really bad. But I can say with confidence, there are hundreds more. And now with the new Trump administration, we're going to be able to go in there and look at them. I think we'll be able to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, hundreds more. That's amazing to think about. Have you received a response to your letter last week to the Treasury Department?
Yes, it's a whole different ballgame for me on the Oversight Committee. The Trump administration actually responds to our request for information. Obviously, they're new and getting their figuring out where the bathrooms are and trying to get a handle over everything. But I'm very confident that the Oversight Committee will be allowed in to view those suspicious activity reports. And the fact that there are so many shows that the banks were suspicious of a lot of activity. And what we believe is what's been reported and suggested on a lot of conservative channels over the years is that this money wasn't actually coming from John Doe and Jane Doe sitting at home donating $10 every week to every Democrat candidate running for every office in America. We always suspected that there was an influx of cash coming in from other ways. And the way ActBlue set up their account, it would be very easy to launder money into there through fake credit card accounts and fake names and things like that. So the banks, by virtue of catching so many violations from so many different banks, which would suggest to me these were credit cards, I think that we're going to be able to find out where the source of a lot of this money was coming from.
So you hear that, folks? For years now, ActBlue has been using fraudulent information to donate huge sums of money to progressive politicians. And on top of that, during the Biden era, they just chose not to respond to any congressional inquiries. So pretty much, they were complicit in all of ActBlue's fraud. And you know why? Because it benefited them, because ActBlue's fraud benefited the Democrats. Here's the reality, folks. Because the progressive left doesn't have any actual real support from Americans, they have to rely on groups like ActBlue to manufacture the illusion of support by filing a bunch of fraudulent campaign donations. As we now know, pretty much all of the progressive left's support is actually entirely fraudulent and funded by various progressive non-governmental organizations and people like George Soros. And you know what? Elon Musk actually gave his thoughts on ActBlue just the other day. Take a look.
If ActBlue and Arabella Networks...
ActBlue is a huge scam, next level.
Do you think it's foreign money, Chinese money? Where do you think the money in ActBlue is coming from? And how do you figure that out?
Well, it's not coming from a whole bunch of, from a groundswell of public support. Because when individual donors are looked at in ActBlue, a bunch of them turn out to be like diehard Republicans,
Right.
people that have never given money in their life. So you're going to track down a bunch of these people where it says, "Oh, I gave $16,000," and they're like, "I didn't give $16,000. What are you talking about?" There's
Well, if those-
Republican friends of mine found themselves on the Act Blue list, and they're like, "It definitely wasn't me." So that's
If it can actually be shown that they are funding firebombing of Tesla charging stations, that's objectively a criminal act. That is funding terrorist activity, and the statutes make clear that an incendiary device qualifies. So
burning
that's a
things
big
down
deal.
is a terrorist activity.
Yeah.
So, you hear that, folks? Right now, Elon Musk and the congressional Republicans have reason to believe that Act Blue hasn't just been filing fraudulent donations. No, they've also allegedly been funding all of these anti-Tesla domestic terror attacks. That's right. All of these domestic terror attacks have actually been directly funded by various radical progressive political action groups, exclusively for the purpose of terrorizing anyone that dares to support President Trump or Elon Musk. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, here's the good news. Now that President Trump is back in the White House, the congressional Republicans can actually start investigating all of this, which means it's only a matter of time before all of these radical progressives start getting held accountable. And as we mentioned earlier, the federal investigations are already underway. But so, back to Congresswoman Crockett. Folks, I have to say, when your political campaign is caught accepting illicit donations from the very same political action group that's been funding domestic terrorist attacks, well, let's just say that that's not a very good look. And you know what? Now that these federal investigations are actually starting to go out, between you and me, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing various other members of the progressive left getting put under the microscope. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I have a feeling that the entire progressive apparatus is rotten from head to toe. Whether they're violating federal campaign laws by making fraudulent donations to progressive politicians like Jasmine Crockett, or literally blowing up Tesla dealerships, these people have got to be stopped. But you know what? Now that President Trump is back in office, they are finally getting stopped. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this. So hey, if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there. As I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.